Well, good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion and my beautiful Katie.
Hey!
We are excited today because we are just outside of Milwaukee and we are going to go visit the grave of one of our favorite actors. Now, this guy steals the movie, in my opinion, but you never actually see his face. And on top of that, being like the star of this movie, that's not even really what he was known for in his life. He was known for being one of the greatest football players of his day. So we are going to go visit today the grave of the great John MATUZAK. Daze with Jordan the Lion and Katie. It begins right now. So he's buried out here near Oak Creek, which is where he was raised. His family lived out here, so he would find his way out here in between football seasons and was eventually buried out here. Don't worry, Jaws here too. He's just in the back seat today. Alright, so right out here in a family plot, it's the great John MATUZAK. Sloth! I didn't tell you guys who we loved. Like, what movie was he in that he was the star of, in our opinion, and that he just stole the movie? It was, yeah, Baby Ruth. The reason I always like to have a Baby Ruth is just, you know, in memory of Sloth. John MATUZAK, he was one of the greatest football players of his day, but he was also in Caveman with Ringo Starr, and he was in North Dallas 40. So here he is, right on the very end. John D. MATUZAK, born in 1950, passed in 1989. He ended up passing of an accidental prescription pill overdose. They found traces of cocaine in his system, which not much of a surprise, but he also had an enlarged heart and pneumonia, so there's a lot of contributing factors. But John was, his family, when he was growing up, he lost two of his brothers when they were very young. So a lot of people didn't know, once he was making a living in football, after the games, he would often go, when he was traveling in different cities, after those road games, he would go to the local children's hospital and go spend time with kids all night. Other players would talk about this. They said even when he retired from playing football, he would go out and dress up as Santa Claus because he just, you know, felt like he missed something from his childhood. And even his sister, Dawn, had some health issues that made it pretty scary. But John was always a big guy, so when John was growing up here in Wisconsin, he was made fun of a lot because he was tall and awkward and bigger than all the other kids. But once he entered high school and was able to play football, he was able to use that to his advantage. He ended up becoming a pretty star football player for the area, but he was a bad student, so he couldn't get any of the big colleges to offer him a scholarship because they didn't think he'd be able to stay. So he ended up going to a little school called Fort Dodge in Iowa, brought his grades up, and then he was able to get a scholarship to University of Missouri. But that turned out to be a pretty tumultuous time in his life. They said that's when he started partying, drinking a lot, doing drugs. And one night, he had an incident that almost derailed his entire life. He was at a party and there was an Air Force cadet, and Katie and I read that he got jealous and got into a fight with this guy and then beat the guy so bad, yeah, that the guy had to have hours of reconstructive surgery and was...
His face was never the same, people said, and it also involved 3 other people. So
8 weeks.
This was a guy who...
in the hospital.
Probably didn't always have control when under certain substances, but at the same time, what power he had. I mean, this was a guy on the field, off the field. it was kind of live fast, die hard. If there's anything you can say about John, that's definitely what people would probably say.
They were actually going to charge him with assault that would have put him in prison. And somehow he was able to cut a deal. Like I said, the cadet that he beat up was in the hospital for 8 weeks. And I read somewhere in the comments of a YouTube video where someone said they were around for that time, and they said he not only beat up one person that night, he beat up 3. They only talk about the one, but they said that that guy suffered lifelong injuries. And somehow they offered John a plea deal. If he would make this deal, then they would just give him a simple arrest. And he said the reason he took it was because he just wanted the matter to go away. So you would think that that would be one of those things that would kind of clean up your act, but unfortunately, because of that incident, as well as other incidents of him being drunk and partying a lot, a new coach came into University of Missouri and didn't want to deal with him and revoked his scholarship. So John ended up having to put the feelers out, and eventually University of Tampa took him in, and he became a star there. He actually became an All-American there. And when he went to the NFL draft, he was the very first player drafted by the Houston Oilers. Now, it's pretty much said that the Daze in Houston were a disaster from the beginning. The team wasn't very good, and they didn't really have a foreseeable future of getting good, and he didn't like this. And the more he was there, the more he felt like he was underpaid. And then NFL went on strike, and during this time he decided to sign with a rival league, the World Football League, and played for the Houston Texans. And one day he was out on the field, or he was on the bench in between plays, and he was served with a cease and desist basically from the Houston Oilers, saying that it was illegal for him to be playing for 2 leagues at the same time. And since he couldn't play, he stood off to the sidelines holding the paperwork up in the air, waving it to the fans, showing him that that's why he wasn't able to be out on the field. So he was forced to go back to the Houston Oilers and became a problem right away. And so they decided they had just had enough, and they traded him over to Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Katie, the days in Kansas City were the days we were kind of laughing about, because it wasn't a good time for his football career, but that's when he had that really famous incident where his girlfriend tried to run him over with a car. And I say we were laughing about it because he was on Letterman, and Letterman brought that up, and John MATUZAK was basically saying, like, yeah, she tried to run me over 2 or 3 times. Dave said, is it true when you went to the Raiders, they said you had to leave the girlfriend behind? He goes, well, yeah, she tried to run me over a couple of times. That's sometimes not good for your health. And he said, yeah, she probably had good reason also. So,
well, John notoriously loved the ladies.
Yeah.
And he made no qualms about that. So,
yeah, he even made a statement, like when Letterman said, what's a good night for you? He said, me and 2 or 3 other girls.
yeah.
But it was crazy, because during that time in Kansas City, he also had an episode where, like I said, he loved to party, and he had a specific night. It was Wednesdays, because apparently, like in the football world, Wednesdays were a big day for defensive players' practices. And so he always considered Wednesdays as the night that he would go out and just go crazy and just party all night. And apparently one of the nights that they went out to do it, he took 2 sleeping pills and passed out at the bar, and the coach of the team had to revive him. And so again, after that, they were like, wow, this is maybe more trouble than it's worth. And so they decided to get rid of him. So they sent him to the Washington Redskins. The Redskins basically ditched him after a couple of weeks, and because the Oakland Raiders were suffering from so many injuries, and Al Davis was known for giving guys second chances, and John was known for being a pretty spirited guy on the field. He liked to fight and go crazy, and just, you know, he liked to be out there and play and get people riled up. He felt like the fans deserved it. The fans were spending their hard-earned money, so he wanted to go out there and give them everything. And he also, because of that, he hated anytime there were talks of strikes or anything like that. He just felt like, you know, in the end, he said, the players deserve a certain amount of money because our shelf life's most times only 5 years. you know, the injuries that we live with after and all the money that we give to taxes and stuff, we really deserve more than what they're giving us. But at the same time, it's not fair for the people that pay our checks and come to all the games and buy season tickets to not get to see football. And he said, I'm a football fan, I want to see football. So he always felt like a lot of the times those negotiations would be held up by one or two people that were trying to make a name for themselves politically in the negotiation field. But he always felt like the obligation first and foremost was to the fans. And so when he came to Oakland to play for the great John Madden, I guess John thought it'd be a good idea to pair him up with someone that can show him the ropes in town and help keep an eye on him, and they put him with Ken Stabler. Ken Stabler and John Matuzak were roommates for a while on the road and best friends. They partied, and it was just, the stories became legendary of John Matuzak and Kenny Stabler. So he ended up winning 2 Super Bowls. They won Super Bowl 11 and Super Bowl 15 for the Raiders while Matuzak was there, and he was having all kinds of issues during those days. He was being pulled over for reckless driving, drunk driving, having narcotics. I mean, you pretty much, he was the antithesis of what you would think of as just someone living life on the edge. And eventually, just with all the injuries that he had sustained, it was making it harder and harder for him to play. So he ended up retiring in 1983, and that's when he started doing all the movies. He started with North Dallas 40, which was one of the greatest football movies ever made. Then he was in Caveman. He would do all kinds of stuff. Katie was reminding me, I always forget, but he was in One Crazy Summer.
It is such a funny role. It's very small, but he's playing this kind of like punk-looking biker, and the hair is just insane. I think he must have had just a really good sense of humor about kind of just messing around. Like, he was a big strong guy, but I think he kind of liked being silly. So he's chasing Demi Moore, her character in this, and he's trying to get money from her, and he ends up going off of a pier, re-emerging from the water, and there are fish sticking up in his hair. It's a really great moment, and I mean, it's classic 80s, so I guarantee you guys have seen it. You probably just didn't know it was him.
Yeah, he was really funny. I mean, that was the thing. Like, we were watching the Letterman interview, and we kept saying to ourselves, Dave's not that funny in this, but John is really funny, because Dave brings up those Wednesday party nights, and he's like, you know, what is it that you said about the Wednesday nights? He goes, oh, I'd go out and party on Wednesday nights, you know, because I was making sure that none of my other teammates were out there doing it. You know, I had to be the guy that was on the straight and narrow. You know, I was out there doing it so I could make sure they weren't doing it, which I thought was like a really funny way to look at it. And he said that the reason he loved doing the movies, which he did love doing the movies, he said it came from, he said, I just like to be seen by a lot of people. He said it's fun, you know, like making people happy and people seeing you on there, and that many people. So he did a lot of movies. But yeah, sadly it was 1989 he ended up, his girlfriend called paramedic because John unfortunately had passed, and it was an accidental painkiller overdose. He had suffered with, that was basically what ended his career. He was just in so much pain and had herniated discs that he didn't know about. And sad, you know, I saw, you know, 1 or 2 comments online of people saying, you know, he was a rule breaker and he never paid for any of the, you know, destruction that he caused. He never really ever was held accountable. But then as you'd read the comments below, you'd see former players from the Raiders that said, I played with this guy for 2 seasons on and off the field. He was one of the best guys you could ever be around. What a blast he was. And then see somebody comment and say that they worked at the old produce market in Los Angeles when the Oakland Raiders moved to Los Angeles. And they were playing at the Coliseum. They said John would come in several days a week after practice, and he would just hang out with the people at the produce market and, you know, basically just be friends. They said he would tell us his plans for the future and tell us jokes and stuff like that. He says he's a real fun guy and a guy that they really missed. So it's kind of nice to hear that behind the scenes and all of this, you know, even though he didn't have any kids that were ever spoken about or anything in public, you know, because of his upbringing and losing his brothers and everything, he decided to give back to the children's hospitals and things like that without people knowing about it. Big fans. Maybe one of the funniest characters, one of the most heroic characters. To me, like I say, he's the star of the movie to me. And it's cool. If you look online, you can find some footage of him in the prosthetics, them putting him on and everything for the movie.
And that took like 5 to 8 hours. I mean, could you imagine sitting on set and having to sit so still? And they also had to use...
Because he had a fake eye.
It was a remote control eye, and they said that they actually had to have someone on set who would count down to time the blinking to make sure it would line up. And there were also a lot of notorious stories because with prosthetics, a lot of those can be water-based adhesives and foam prosthetics. They were told, don't get him wet. Please don't get him wet. So there were definitely some times where they said production would be on hold all day long because, I mean, this was a pirate movie. They were in the water, so...
Yeah, he was the Douglas Fairbanks at the end of the movie,
yes.
so...
So I think it was probably, there were moments of frustration, but at the same time, he had a good time doing this, and the kids
he's a legend now
absolutely
because
loved
of
him.
it.
He's in the music video with Cyndi Lauper. I mean, this was just such a good time in history, and he got to be a part of that. So I bet it was something he really enjoyed.
And the thing to me is, like, you know, for people that were older than Katie and I, he's John MATUZAK the Raider. He's John MATUZAK the football player. And so it's really cool that something that he probably, you know, in all honesty, probably one of the reasons that he got into acting when he retired was because as a member of the Screen Actors Guild, you have a really good health plan and everything. You know, who knows what the reasoning was, but that to be known by an entire generation for your second career is so cool. Rest in peace, John MATUZAK. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next time. Hey, you guys!